The year was 2147, and the world was at peace. Humans had solved many of their problems. There was no more hunger in most countries. Technology had made life easier and better. People went to work, came home to their families, and lived normal lives. They had no idea that everything was about to change forever. Commander Hyun stood on the roof of his apartment building in Seoul. He was a tall man with tired eyes and strong hands. He had served in the military for 20 years and had seen many things, but nothing could prepare him for what he saw that night. The sky turned dark. Not the darkness of night, but something else. Something wrong. Hyun looked up and saw massive shapes blocking the stars. At first, he thought they were clouds. Then the shapes began to glow with strange lights. Red, blue, purple, colors that seemed to move and pulse like a heartbeat. His phone rang. It was his old friend Tae, who worked at the Space Monitoring Center. Hyun, are you seeing this? Tae's voice was shaking. They came from nowhere. One moment the sky was empty. The next moment, there were hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. What are they? Hyun asked, but he already knew the answer. Deep in his heart, he knew. Ships, Tae said. They are ships. And they are not from Earth. Across the world, people stopped what they were doing. They came out of their homes and offices. They stood in the streets and looked up at the sky. In New York, Tokyo, London, Mumbai, and every city on Earth, the same scene played out. Millions of people, standing in silence, watching the impossible happen. The ships were enormous. The smallest ones were bigger than football stadiums. The largest ones were the size of small countries. They hung in the air without making any sound. No engines, no fire, just floating there, as if gravity meant nothing to them. Nari was a young scientist who worked at a research center in Busan. She was smart and curious, always asking questions that others could not answer. When she saw the ships, she did not feel fear. She felt wonder. What kind of technology could do this? What kind of beings had built these incredible machines? Her colleague Jin ran into her office. His face was pale. They are broadcasting something, he said. Every channel, every frequency, the same message. They turned on the screen. A face appeared. It was not human. The creature had gray skin and large black eyes. Its mouth was small, and its head was shaped like a triangle. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect English, perfect Korean, perfect every language on Earth, at the same time. People of Earth, the creature said. We are the Voran Empire. We have traveled across the stars to reach your world. You have 72 hours to surrender. Give us your planet, and we will let you live as servants. Refuse, and we will take it by force. There will be no negotiation. There will be no discussion. You have 72 hours. The message ended. The screen went black. For a moment, the whole world was silent. Then, the chaos began. General Q was the highest-ranking military officer in the country. He was an old man with white hair and a face made of stone. He had fought in wars before, but those were wars against other humans. This was something completely different. He gathered his commanders in an underground bunker. Hyun was among them. What do we know about these Voran? Q asked. A young officer named Wu stepped forward. He had been studying the ships since they arrived. Sir, their technology is far beyond ours. Our best estimates say they are at least 1,000 years more advanced. Maybe more. Our weapons, our missiles, they would be like throwing rocks at a tank. Q nodded slowly. And their numbers? We count over 3,000 ships in orbit around Earth. Each ship carries soldiers. We estimate their total force at around 50 million. The room fell silent. Earth had powerful armies, but nothing like this. No one had ever imagined an enemy like this. Hyun spoke up. Sir, what about surrender? Q looked at him with cold eyes. Surrender means slavery. They said it themselves. We would become servants. Our children. Our grandchildren. All servants. Forever. And if we fight? Q did not answer. He did not need to. Everyone in the room knew what fighting meant. It meant death. Millions of deaths. Maybe billions. Nari and her team worked through the night. They studied every piece of data they could find about the Voran ships. Their energy signatures. Their movements. Their materials. She barely slept. She barely ate. She just worked. They are arrogant, she said to Jin. Look at how they position their ships. No defensive formations, no caution. They do not think we can hurt them. Drowned. Can we? Jin asked. Nari was quiet for a long time. I do not know yet. But arrogance is a weakness. It is always a weakness. The 72 hours passed like a bad dream. World leaders met and argued. Some wanted to surrender. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to negotiate, even though the Voran had said there would be no negotiation. In the end, humanity chose to fight. It was not a choice made by one person or one country. It was a choice made by billions of people who refused to become slaves. They knew they would probably lose. They knew many of them would die. But they would rather die free than live as servants. When the deadline passed, the Voran did not wait. Their ships opened fire. Hyun watched from the bunker as Seoul began to burn. The Voran weapons were like nothing he had ever seen. Beams of pure energy that cut through buildings like they were made of paper. Explosions that left no fire, only ash. Millions died in the first hour. Cities that had stood for centuries were gone in minutes. The Voran showed no mercy. They killed soldiers and civilians without any difference. Old people. Children. It did not matter to them. Nari managed to escape from Busan before the city was destroyed. She joined a group of survivors heading underground. The government had prepared secret bunkers years ago. In case of nuclear war, now those bunkers became the last hope for humanity. As she climbed down into the darkness, Nari looked back one last time. She saw her city burning. She saw people running and screaming. She saw Voran soldiers marching through the streets, killing everyone they found. She made a promise to herself in that moment. She would survive. She would learn. And one day, she would make them pay for what they had done. The invasion had begun. The Voran thought it would be easy. They thought humans were weak and primitive. They thought this war would be over quickly. They were wrong. They were very, very wrong. The first month was hell on earth. The Voran did not stop their attack for even one moment. Day and night. Their ships flew across the sky, raining destruction on everything below. Cities became graveyards. Countries became wastelands. The beautiful blue planet was turning gray and black. Captain Nari led a group of survivors through the ruins of what used to be a highway. There were 47 people with her. Some were soldiers. Some were scientists. Most were ordinary people who had lost everything. Their homes, their families, their hope. A young woman named Yuna walked beside Nari. She was only 20 years old, but her eyes looked much older now. She had watched her parents die in the first attack. She had not spoken a word since then. She just followed the group in silence. "We need to find water," said a man named Day. He was a former teacher who had somehow survived the destruction of his school. "The last bottles are almost empty." Nari looked at the gray sky. The Voran ships were always there. Watching. Hunting. Going out in the open was dangerous. But staying hidden meant dying of thirst. "There is a river about 5 kilometers east," she said. "We will go tonight, when it is dark." The Voran ships do not see as well in darkness. Underground, in a bunker somewhere in the mountains, Commander Hyun was trying to put together what remained of the military. It was not much. Most of the bases had been destroyed. Most of the soldiers were dead. The ones who survived were scattered, hiding, trying to stay alive. General Q was dead. He had died fighting, leading a desperate attack against a Voran landing force. The attack had failed. Everyone who participated had died. But Kyu had bought time for thousands of civilians to escape. His sacrifice was not forgotten. Now Hyun was in charge. He did not want this responsibility. He was just a commander, not a general. But someone had to lead. And he was the highest-ranking officer left alive. "How many do we have?" he asked his assistant, a young man named Ho. Ho checked his tablet. "Confirmed survivors. About 3,000 soldiers spread across multiple bunkers. Estimated survivors we have not contacted yet. Maybe another 5,000. Total military strength, less than 10,000. Hyun closed his eyes. Before the invasion, the military had millions of soldiers. Now they were down to thousands. And the Voran had millions of soldiers still waiting in their ships. What about weapons? We have small arms, rifles, grenades, some vehicles that still work. But all our heavy weapons are gone. No tanks, no planes, no missiles that can reach the ships." Hyun nodded. He had expected this. "And the scientists?" "And the scientists?" Ho allowed himself a small smile. "That is the good news, sir. Several research teams survived, including Dr. Nari and her group. They are heading toward us now." The Voran soldiers walked through the destroyed cities like they owned them. Because they did. They set up bases and processing centers where they gathered human prisoners. The prisoners were sorted into categories. Strong ones would work as slaves. Weak ones were eliminated. Children were separated from parents. Families were torn apart. A Voran officer named Thorn stood in the middle of what used to be a park. He looked at the human prisoners kneeling before him with disgust. These creatures were so small and weak. How had they ever thought they could resist the Empire? "This planet is rich," Thorn said to his lieutenant. "Good water, good soil, good minerals. The Emperor will be pleased. We will make this a productive colony." "What about the resistance, sir?" the lieutenant asked. "Some humans are still fighting." Thorn laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Let them fight. Let them hide in their holes like animals. We will find them eventually. They cannot fight forever. They have no weapons, no food, no hope. Give it 6 months. They will come crawling out, begging to become our slaves." But Thorn was wrong. He did not understand humans. He did not understand what they were capable of when they had nothing left to lose. Nari and her group reached the river without being spotted. They filled every container they had with water. But as they were leaving, they saw something that made them stop. A Voran patrol was marching a group of prisoners along the opposite bank. About 50 humans, tied together with metal chains. Men, women, and children. They were being taken to a processing center. "We cannot help them," Day whispered. "We have no weapons. We would just get ourselves killed." Nari knew he was right. But then she looked at Yuna. The young woman was staring at the prisoners. One of them was a little girl, maybe 7 years old. She was crying silently, too scared to make any sound. Something changed in Yuna's eyes. For the first time since her parents died, she showed emotion. It was not sadness. It was not fear. It was anger. Pure, burning anger. "I will not watch," Yuna said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I will not watch them be taken." She picked up a rock from the ground. Before anyone could stop her, she was running toward the river. It happened so fast. Yuna threw the rock. It hit a Voran soldier in the head. The soldier fell. The other soldiers turned, confused. In that moment of confusion, the prisoners started to run. Nari did not think. She just acted. She shouted for her group to help. They charged at the Voran patrol with rocks, sticks, anything they could find. It was madness. It should not have worked, but it did. The Voran soldiers were not prepared for an attack. They expected humans to run and hide, not to charge at them. In the chaos, most of the prisoners escaped. 3 Voran soldiers were killed. The others retreated, calling for backup. Nari grabbed Yuna and ran. They ran until they could not run anymore. When they finally stopped, hiding in an abandoned factory, Nari looked at the young woman with new respect. "That was incredibly stupid," Nari said. Yuna nodded. Yes. But it worked. Nari smiled. For the first time since the invasion began, she smiled. Yes. It worked. They had won a tiny victory. It meant nothing in the grand scale of the war, but it meant everything to the people they had saved. And it meant something else too. It proved that the Voran could be beaten, they could be hurt, they could be killed. Word of the attack spread through the survivor networks. Other groups started doing the same thing. Small attacks. Quick strikes. Hit and run. The Voran lost a few soldiers here. A few soldiers there. It was not enough to threaten them, but it was enough to annoy them. Thorn received reports of the attacks with growing frustration. Find these resistance fighters, he ordered. Destroy them. Make examples of them. Show the humans what happens when they resist. The Voran launched massive search operations. They burned forests where survivors might be hiding. They flooded tunnels and caves. They used technology that could detect human heartbeats from kilometers away, but the humans adapted. They learned to hide better. They learned to move faster. They learned to fight smarter. Every day that passed, they became a little harder to kill. 6 weeks after the invasion, Nari finally reached the mountain bunker where Hyun was organizing the resistance. When she walked through the door, she was carrying something with her, a Voron weapon. She had taken it from one of the soldiers they killed at the river. She placed the weapon on the table in front of Hyun. I have been studying this for 3 weeks, she said. I understand how it works. I can copy it. I can make it better. Hyun looked at the weapon, then at Nari. Hope flickered in his tired eyes. Real hope. How long do you need? Nari smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had seen too much death and was ready to give some back. Give me 6 months, she said. Give me 6 months, and I will give you weapons that can kill anything in the sky. The Voran thought they had won. They thought the war was over. They did not know that the real war was just beginning. 18 months had passed since the invasion. The surface of Earth was still controlled by the Voran. Their flags flew over every major city. Their soldiers patrolled every street. To anyone watching from above, it looked like humanity had been completely defeated. But underground, something was happening. Something the Voran could not see. Something that would change everything. Nari stood in front of a large metal object covered by a sheet. Around her were the best engineers and scientists humanity had left. Hyun was there too, along with the military commanders from bunkers all over the world. They had come through secret tunnels that connected the underground bases like a spider web. 18 months ago, I made a promise. Nari said. I promised to give you weapons that could fight back against the Voran. Today, I am keeping that promise. She pulled the sheet away. Underneath was a weapon unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was sleek and beautiful, glowing with soft blue light. It looked like something from a dream. The Voran use energy weapons, Nari explained. Their technology converts matter directly into energy beams. Very powerful. Very efficient. But we found a weakness. She picked up a small device and attached it to the weapon. Their ships have shields that block energy weapons. That is why our missiles could not hurt them. The energy just bounces off, but these shields do not work against certain kinds of radiation. Radiation that we can create. Hyun leaned forward. You are saying we can break through their shields? Nari nodded. Not just break through. Destroy. This weapon does not just punch a hole in their shields. It causes the shields to collapse completely. One shot, and their ships become vulnerable to everything. Our old missiles. Our old bombs. Everything. The room was silent. Then, slowly, a smile spread across Hyun's face. It was the first real smile he had worn in 18 months. How many can you build? We have already built 50. We can build more. Many more. But we need resources. Materials. And we need people who can fight. That was where General Tae came in. He was a large man with a loud voice and a heart full of fire. Before the invasion, he had been a training instructor. He had taught young soldiers how to fight, how to survive, how to never give up. Now he had a much harder job. "The Voran think we are beaten," Tay said to a group of resistance fighters in a training facility deep underground. "They think we are hiding in the dirt like worms, waiting to die. They are wrong." He walked among the fighters. They were young and old, men and women. Some had been soldiers before. Many had been teachers, farmers, office workers. Now, they were all warriors. "For 18 months, we have been gathering our strength, learning, preparing. The enemy does not know what is coming. But you do. You know that humanity does not surrender. You know that humanity does not give up. And you know that humanity does not forgive." The fighters cheered. It was a sound full of anger and hope and determination. The sound of people who had lost everything and were ready to take it back. Yuna was among them. The quiet young woman who had started the first resistance attack at the river had become a legend. She had fought in dozens of battles. She had killed more Voran soldiers than anyone could count. She had become a symbol of hope for survivors everywhere, but she was also tired. So tired. She sat alone after the training session, staring at the wall. A man named Bin sat down beside her. He was a medic who had been treating wounded fighters for months. He had kind eyes and gentle hands. "You should rest," he said. "We have a big fight coming. You need your strength." Yuna shook her head. "I cannot rest. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. My parents. The people I could not save. The ones who died because I was not fast enough." Bin was quiet for a moment. "I understand. I lost my wife and son in the first attack. I could not save them either. For a long time, I wanted to die. I thought that would be easier than living with the pain. What changed? I realized that dying would not bring them back. But fighting might save others. So, I fight. Not for revenge. Not for anger. For hope. For the future." Yuna looked at him. Something in his words touched her heart. For the first time in a long time, she felt something other than rage. "Hope," she said quietly. "I had forgotten what that feels like." Above ground, the Voran were becoming worried. Not because of the resistance attacks, which they still considered minor annoyances. They were worried because something strange was happening. Thorn stood in his command center, looking at reports on a screen. "What do you mean? Communications are failing?" His lieutenant looked nervous. "Sir, we are losing contact with some of our patrols, and some of our supply ships are disappearing. No distress signals. No explanation. They just vanish. Equipment failure? Unlikely, sir. It is happening too often to be random. I think the humans are doing something." Thorn laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The humans? With what? Rocks and sticks? They have nothing that can threaten our ships." But even as he said it, a cold feeling crept into his hearts. For the first time since the invasion began, Thorn felt something he had never felt before. Uncertainty. Underground, the final preparations were being made. Hyun gathered his top commanders for a last meeting before the operation began. "We have spent 18 months in the shadows," he said. "We have watched our world burn. We have buried our dead. We have cried our tears. Now it is time for the Voran to cry." He displayed a holographic map of Earth. Red dots showed Voran positions. Blue dots showed resistance bases. "Our first target is the main processing center in what used to be Seoul. This is where they sort prisoners, where they separate families, where they decide who lives and who dies. We are going to destroy it." A commander named Un raised her hand. She was a small woman, but her voice was strong. "What about the prisoners inside? There could be thousands of them." "We will get them out first. We have agents inside who have been preparing for months. When the attack begins, they will open the gates and lead the prisoners to safety. Then we destroy the building. Nari added. The shield-breaking weapons will be deployed here, here, and here. She pointed to 3 positions on the map. Once the shields are down, our fighters will attack with conventional weapons, rockets, explosives, anything that goes boom. Hyun looked at the faces around him. These were the people who had survived impossible odds, who had refused to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. They were tired, they were scared, but they were ready. Tomorrow, we begin the operation. Tomorrow, we show the Voran what humanity is made of. Tomorrow, we start taking back our world. That night, Yuna could not sleep. She walked through the underground tunnels, looking at the sleeping fighters. Soon, many of them would be dead. That was the reality of war. Some of them would not come back. She stopped at a small memorial wall where people had placed photos of lost loved ones. There were thousands of pictures, faces of children, parents, friends, each one a reminder of what had been lost. Yuna added her own photo. It was her parents, smiling on their wedding day. They looked so happy, so full of hope. I will finish this, she whispered to the photo. I will make sure your deaths were not for nothing, I promise. When morning came, the operation began. Across the world, resistance forces emerged from their hiding places. They attacked Voran positions with the new shield-breaking weapons, and for the first time, the Voran learned what it felt like to be afraid. The awakening had begun. Humanity was no longer hiding. Humanity was fighting back. The attack on the Soul Processing Center was just the beginning. All across Earth, resistance forces struck at the same moment. In every country, on every continent, the Vorans suddenly found themselves under attack. Lieutenant J led the assault on the main orbital defense station. He was a former pilot who had spent the last 18 months learning to fly captured Voran ships. It had not been easy. The controls were strange, the language was impossible. But he had learned, because he had no other choice. His team consisted of 12 pilots in 12 stolen ships. They flew toward the massive station that controlled the Voran shields around Earth. If they could destroy it, the alien ships in orbit would lose their protection. Remember the plan, Jay said over the radio. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we get out. No heroics. No unnecessary risks. We need everyone to survive this. But even as he said it, Jay knew that some of them would not survive. That was the price of freedom. A price they were all willing to pay. The station detected them when they were still far away. Alarms sounded. Voran fighters launched to intercept them, but they were too slow. Jay and his team had practiced this attack hundreds of times in simulations. They knew exactly what to do. They split into 3 groups. The first group drew the Voran fighters away. The second group attacked the station's weapon systems. The third group, led by Jay, flew directly at the station's power core. A pilot named Sue was part of the first group. She was young, only 22, but she flew like someone who had been born in space. Her stolen Voran ship danced through the enemy fire, dodging and weaving like a leaf in the wind. 3 on my tail, she reported calmly, drawing them away from the main group. She led the Voran fighters on a chase through the debris field around the station. They followed her, firing constantly, but none of their shots hit. Sue was too fast, too skilled, too angry. When she had led them far enough from the station, she turned sharply and flew directly at them. The Voran pilots were surprised. Humans usually ran away. They did not attack. Sue fired her weapons at point-blank range. 2 of the 3 Voran fighters exploded. The third tried to escape, but Sue was faster. She destroyed it before it could get away. 3 kills, she reported, moving to support the main attack. Back at the station, Jay and his group had reached the power core. It was protected by thick armor and powerful weapons. But Nari had given them something special for this moment. Jay launched a missile carrying one of the shield-breaking devices. When it hit the station's shields, there was a flash of blue light. Then the shields were gone. Shields down, Jay announced. All units. Fire everything you have. 12 ships launched everything they had at the exposed power core. Missiles, energy beams, everything. The core exploded in a massive ball of fire that could be seen from Earth. Without the orbital station, the Voran ships lost their shield coordination. Some of their shields failed completely. Others became weak and unstable. For the first time, the alien fleet was vulnerable. On the ground, Hyun watched the explosion through a telescope. He smiled grimly. "Begin Phase 2, he ordered. Across the world, hidden launch sites opened. Missiles that humans had been building in secret for 18 months flew into the sky. These were not ordinary missiles. They carried warheads designed by Nari, specifically made to exploit the weaknesses in Voran technology. The Voran fleet tried to defend itself. But they were confused, disorganized. Their command structure had relied on the orbital station. And now it was gone. Ships fired at each other in the chaos. Some tried to flee. Others crashed into the atmosphere. In his command center, Thorn watched in horror as his fleet burned. This was impossible. Humans were primitive, weak. They did not have technology like this. They could not fight like this. "Sir, we are receiving surrender requests from multiple units," his lieutenant said. "What should I tell them?" Thorn's gray face twisted with rage. "Surrender? The Voran Empire does not surrender. Tell them to keep fighting." But it was too late. The battle was already lost. In the first hour of the attack, the humans destroyed over 200 Voran ships. In the second hour, they destroyed another 300. By nightfall, half of the invasion fleet was gone. On Earth, the prisoners in the processing centers saw the explosions in the sky. They heard the fighting. And when the resistance fighters opened the gates and told them to run, they ran. Hundreds of thousands of people, finally free after 18 months of slavery. Yuna led a group of fighters through the ruins of the Soul Processing Center. They were looking for the last prisoners, the ones who were too weak or sick to run on their own. They found them in a basement, chained to the walls. One of the prisoners was an old woman who could barely walk. Yuna picked her up and carried her on her back. "Thank you," the old woman whispered. "Thank you for not forgetting us." Yuna could not speak. Her throat was too tight with emotion. She just kept walking, carrying the woman toward the exit. Outside, the sky was full of burning ships. It was the most beautiful thing Yuna had ever seen. The Voran retreat was chaotic. Ships that could still fly gathered around their remaining carriers and fled toward deep space. They left behind soldiers on the ground. Equipment. Supplies. They left behind everything except their shame. Thorn was among the last to leave. His personal ship lifted off just as the resistance forces arrived at his command center. He looked down at the planet he had thought would be an easy conquest. He looked at the fires and the destruction and the humans who refused to die. "This is not over," he said to no one in particular. "We will return. We will bring more ships, more soldiers. We will destroy every last one of them." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. He had underestimated the humans. The whole empire had underestimated them. And now they were paying the price. Back on Earth, the celebrations began. People who had spent 18 months hiding underground came out into the sunlight. They cried and laughed and hugged each other. They could not believe it was real. After so much death and suffering, they had won. But Hyun did not celebrate. He stood alone, looking at a map showing the Voran retreat. The aliens were falling back to their base on the moon. From there, they could call for reinforcements. They could rebuild their fleet. They could attack again. Nari joined him. "We should be celebrating," she said. "We just won the biggest victory in human history." "We have not won yet," Hyun replied. "We have only won a battle. The Voran still exist. They still have their empire. They will come back. So what do we do?" Hyun was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was cold and hard. "We make sure they cannot come back. We do not just drive them away from Earth. We follow them. We find their homeworld. And we end this war forever." Nari stared at him. "You mean..." "Yes. I mean we take the war to them. No negotiations. No peace treaties. We finish this. It was a decision that would change everything. A decision that would shake the galaxy. A decision that would teach the universe that humanity was not to be threatened. The reckoning had begun. And it would not end until the Voran Empire was nothing but ash and memory. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Earth. 5 years of building. 5 years of preparation. 5 years of planning the final assault on the Voran Empire. Admiral Hyun stood on the bridge of the humanity's flagship, the Remembrance. It was the largest ship ever built by human hands, created using a combination of human determination and captured Voran technology. Behind it stretched a fleet of over 1,000 vessels, all crewed by humans who remembered what the Voran had done to their world. Jump coordinates confirmed, Admiral, reported Captain Sue. The young pilot who had destroyed 3 enemy fighters during the Battle of Earth was now one of humanity's most respected officers. We are ready to begin the final approach. Hyun nodded slowly. He was an old man now, his hair completely white, his face lined with years of war and worry. But his eyes were still sharp, still burning with the same fire that had kept him fighting when all hope seemed lost. All ships. This is Admiral Hyun. He spoke into the fleet-wide communication system. In a few hours, we will arrive at the Voran homeworld. Many of you were children when they invaded our planet. Many of you lost parents, siblings, friends. I know your pain. I share it. He paused, looking at the stars on the main screen. Somewhere out there was the planet that had sent the fleet that destroyed billions of human lives. The Voran came to Earth expecting easy prey. They found something else. They found a species that does not surrender, that does not forgive, that does not forget. Today, we deliver the final lesson. Today, we show the universe what happens when you attack humanity. Cheers echoed through every ship in the fleet. 5 years of anger, 5 years of grief, 5 years of burning desire for justice. It was all about to be unleashed. On the Voran homeworld, panic was spreading. For 5 years, they had watched the humans grow stronger. They had seen their outer colonies fall one by one. They had received desperate messages from ships that encountered the human fleet and never returned. The Voran Emperor sat on his throne, surrounded by advisors who had no advice to give. He was an ancient creature, old even by Voran standards. He had ruled for 300 years. He had conquered 100 worlds. He had never known defeat, until now. How many ships do we have? He asked. 6,000. Great one, his military commander answered. But the humans have weapons we cannot counter. Our shields are useless against them. Our technology means nothing. Then we will surrender. Offer them peace. The commander looked uncomfortable. We have tried, Great One. They do not respond to our messages. They destroy every ship we send to negotiate. They are not interested in peace. The Emperor closed his large black eyes. He remembered the reports from Earth. He remembered approving the invasion. He remembered thinking it would be a simple conquest. Kill a few billion primitives, take their planet, move on to the next world. How wrong he had been. Prepare the defense fleet, he said finally. If we must die, we will die fighting. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Admiral Hyun looked at the Voran homeworld on the main screen. It was a large planet, covered with cities and industry. Billions of Voran lived there. Billions of beings who had supported the war against Earth. Who had cheered when human cities burned. Who had profited from human slavery. Admiral, the Voran fleet is moving to intercept, Sue reported. 6,000 ships. They are forming a defensive line around the planet. Hyun smiled grimly. Only 6,000? Good. This will be quick. General Nari stood beside him. She was no longer just a scientist. She had become one of humanity's greatest military leaders, designing the strategies that had won battle after battle against the Voran. They are desperate, she said. They know they cannot win. But they will fight anyway. Then we will destroy them anyway. The battle began. It was not really a fair fight. The Voran had numbers, but humans had better weapons, better tactics, and 5 years of experience defeating Voran forces across the galaxy. Human ships cut through the Voran fleet like fire through paper. Shield-breaking missiles disabled the alien defenses. Plasma cannons designed by Nari burned through their hulls. In the first hour, over 1,000 Voran ships were destroyed. In the second hour, another 2,000. The Voran tried every tactic they knew. They tried surrounding the human ships. They tried ramming them. They tried sacrificing smaller ships to create openings. Nothing worked. The humans had seen all of these tactics before. They had countered all of them. Yuna commanded one of the assault carriers. She was not on the front lines anymore. She was too valuable to risk in direct combat. But she watched every moment of the battle, remembering everyone she had lost. "For my parents," she whispered as Voran ships exploded on the screen. "For everyone who died in the invasion. For the children who never grew up. For the families that were torn apart. For all of them." Beside her stood Bin, the medic who had become her husband. They had married 2 years ago, in a small ceremony on a rebuilt Earth. He held her hand and said nothing. He did not need to. He understood. By the end of the third hour, the Voran fleet was gone. All 6,000 ships destroyed or captured. Human losses were minimal. Less than 50 ships. The technology gap had become too great for the Voran to overcome. Now only the planet remained. Admiral Hyun addressed the fleet one more time. "The Voran Emperor has requested surrender. He offers unconditional terms. Everything we want. Peace. Reparations. Justice for the invasion." He paused. The silence was heavy. 20 years ago, when they came to Earth, we offered the same thing. We offered to negotiate. To find peace. They refused. They chose to invade. To kill. To enslave. They showed us no mercy. They gave us no choice. His voice hardened. The Voran made their decision. Now we make ours. He turned to Nari. "Target the capital city. Fire when ready." The weapons on the human flagship powered up. A beam of pure energy, the most powerful weapon ever created by human hands, struck the Voran capital. The city that had stood for 10,000 years was gone in an instant. Millions of Voran died in that single shot. But it was not over. More shots followed. City after city was destroyed. The Voran Emperor and his entire government were killed. Military bases were eliminated. Any installation that could pose a threat to humanity was targeted and destroyed. The Voran population fled in terror. Refugees filled the roads and the skies, trying to escape the destruction, but there was nowhere to go. The human fleet surrounded the planet. No ship could leave without permission. Finally, when the smoke cleared and the fires died down, the human assault stopped. Half the planet was in ruins. The Voran Empire that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was broken beyond repair. Admiral Hyun looked at the devastation on the screen. He felt no joy, no satisfaction, only a cold emptiness where his rage used to be. "Is it done?" Sue asked quietly. "It is done," Hyun replied. "The Voran will never threaten anyone again. They do not have the resources, the leadership, the will. They are finished." Nari stood beside him, her face unreadable. "We killed millions today. Civilians, children, beings who had nothing to do with the invasion." "Yes," Hyun said. "We did. Just as they killed billions of our people. Our civilians. Our children. We did not start this war. We did not choose to fight. But we chose how to end it." He turned to face her. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think any of us wanted this? They forced our hand. They came to our world and burned it. They enslaved our people and killed our children. They showed us that mercy was weakness, that forgiveness was suicide. We learned the lesson they taught us, and we applied it. Years later, historians would debate the morality of what humanity did to the Voran. Some called it justice. Others called it genocide. The truth, as always, was complicated, but one thing was certain. The human fleet returned to Earth as heroes. They had done what no one thought possible. They had defeated an empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had taken their revenge for every death, every destroyed city, every broken family. And across the galaxy, other species watched in shock and fear. They had heard stories about humans before. Stories about a primitive species on a small planet, in an unremarkable solar system. They had not paid attention. Now they paid attention. Now they understood the truth that the Voran had learned too late. Humans were not prey. Humans were not victims. Humans were survivors. Fighters. Winners. And heaven help anyone foolish enough to threaten them. On the rebuilt streets of Seoul, Yuna walked with Bin and their 2 children. The city was beautiful again, filled with parks and buildings and people living normal lives. It was hard to believe that it had once been nothing but ash and rubble. Her daughter pointed at the sky, where a memorial satellite passed overhead. It carried the names of everyone who had died in the invasion. 8 billion names. A reminder of what had been lost. "Mommy, what is that?" the girl asked. Yuna knelt down and hugged her daughter. "That is a promise," she said. "A promise that we will never forget, and that we will never let it happen again." The war was over. Humanity had won, and the universe would never be the same.